So let me begin by asking this question. Why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the protection that did not protect the protected in the first place?
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome to our Tuesday edition of the program, Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. Okay, I didn't know if I was going to get that question out, but I'm going to repeat it again, and I want you to listen to it carefully as we go through a story at the beginning of our program today. Got several topics I want to discuss, not just one. But I wanted to begin with something that somebody shared with me, and it makes a lot of sense. I keep saying sometimes the truth is right in front of us, and it doesn't take a lot of investigation to figure it out. It becomes evidentially clear. And this is one of them. This question was actually asked by someone in the medical profession that has been observing everything going on with COVID-19, vaccinations, hospitalizations, treatments, everything. The politics to it. Oh, yeah, politics. Who'd have thunk? But listen carefully to this question and then stop and pause, and then we're going to talk about this a little bit. So why do the protected, those that have taken the vaccine, for example, why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected? Those that have some questions about this vaccine, or little children who probably shouldn't be taking it, except those that want to make money want to put this in their arms, and we'll get to the other kind of people that live in abject fear of little kids spreading corona. So why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to then use the protection that did not protect the protected in the first place? Do you understand what I'm saying? We know now for a fact, this is not speculation. I don't care what CNN says. CNN doesn't understand truth. They only understand agenda. So is MSNBC. If you're watching those outlets, it's kind of like reading Pravda back in 1956 in Russia. It's kind of like reading any newspaper permitted to be published in 1941 Germany, or the newspapers printed during the time of Mao Zedong in China, or any news outlet today in North Korea. It's going to have the truth as permitted by those in power. So it is a good question. So why do the vaccinated need to be protected from the unvaccinated if the vaccination is supposed to protect you to begin with? Well, we know now it doesn't. And there lies our problem. We have this vaccination, and we find out in time what benefit they may provide fades away quickly. And they may leave other major health issues behind that nobody really wants to address, but needs to be addressed. We mentioned on yesterday's program, this young family, thinking they're doing the right thing, they went to get their children vaccinated, as they normally do for the flu and their other stuff that's supposed to be done. They go to Walgreens. Should be a pretty good place to go to get this kind of stuff done. And then they find out from the pharmacist that the entire family was vaccinated for COVID-19, even though the parents had just had that vaccine not long ago, and they're too young to be eligible for a booster. Now their 4-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter received the COVID-19 vaccine, and they've had to see a cardiologist, a child cardiologist. They're having issues. It's causing these two children some health issues. And of course, Walgreens doesn't want to give them the proper card because that's liability, and you know how the rest goes. And you have people in Washington, like the President of the United States, who I think has a mental deficiency beyond words. He can't even address anybody anymore. He comes and reads his statement and walks away. Walk Away Joe is now his new name. Just walk away. Walk Away Joe. And all he talks about is everybody, the problem is the unvaccinated. Well, if the vaccines were working, it wouldn't matter. The only people that would be putting themselves at any kind of a risk would be the unvaccinated. But you have people that are vaccinated that are looking at the unvaccinated as the risk factor to them, even though, and I got a story on this too, the vaccines are probably what's making the variants that are so much of a problem today, but nobody wants to face it. After all, if you're Pfizer, if you're Moderna, if you're Johnson & Johnson, if you're AstraZeneca, you don't want this cash cow bringing in the billions of dollars by the wheelbarrow full to go away. This is big bucks. And you've rushed an experiment you've been trying to make work for 2 decades, over 20 years. mRNA technology has been around for a while, but not for human beings because it hadn't worked. Somehow he got it right. I have a hard time believing that. So let's understand what this story is telling us here. There's a massive propaganda campaign. That's all I can call it. I can't find any other word. And it's done by the media against anybody that is choosing not to vaccinate with an experimental vaccine. And regardless of what you keep hearing people say, like Facebook keeps pushing this phony narrative. All these vaccines are heavily tested and they're safe and approved. They have an emergency approval. Comirnaty, the trade name for the Pfizer, is still not really being used here. Because the second that Pfizer gives you the trade-named version, they become financially liable for the first time. Right now, under the emergency use authorization, they're not liable for a penny if you willingly take that vaccine and it causes you harm. That's what the emergency use authorization permits. No liability. And the whole idea of this emergency use authorization goes back a number of years. No, in the early 2000s when we were discussing the possibility of biological warfare. And let's say the enemy came up with something and we had to do something in a hurry and we're not sure how it's going to work, but you could make an informed consent to take it, but you just can't sue. I understand where that comes from. So the mainstream media, big tech corporations are tyrants or idiots at Facebook. The 20-some-odd-year-old with tattoos and purple hair with a tint of orange, some wearing a face diaper, and probably even some metal in his lips, riding around on a skateboard. He's now your expert on compliance. And they in CNN, like Don Lemon, who's another intellectually and morally and spiritually bankrupt individual, and Chris Cuomo, and Stetzler, and everybody over there, and Rachel Maddow, they're all saying, they're the same ones that said they would never take the Trump vaccine, but now they are selling this like a snake oil salesman. They're pushing it hard, man. You got to take it to live. I think they're just trying to reinforce the fact they took it and they don't know. But see, this mantra, this idea of shaming people, rewarding compliance, and shaming and marginalizing anybody that disagrees with the unproven science. Oh, we're told to follow the science. Yeah. Well, the science is incomplete on this stuff, so how do you follow an incomplete narrative? So the mantra says, this is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Persons who choose not to vaccinate, well, they're characterized as unintelligent. They're selfish. They're paranoid people. I'll tell you about a paranoid person in a minute. They don't read much. They must live in a trailer park in Alabama or Texas, maybe in the middle of Florida. Yeah, maybe South Carolina or Georgia too. Tennessee, I don't know. But that's how you're portrayed. You know, a low-life individual who's not too smart. There's never been in my lifetime such an effort to manipulate through fear, penalize, threaten, to take something experimental. But as time has gone on, and this is what's on our side, time. As time has gone on and more data begins to trickle out about the virus, about the vaccine. Oh, by the way, when I think of people in trailer parks in Florida, you know, some of these people have got, you know, they're retired with PhDs, so be very careful. You realize the majority of people that don't take the vaccine have PhDs, just so you know. But you're trying to be told you're just dumb trailer trash from Alabama or some other state in the South. You know, you're not one of the elites from New York or California, Los Angeles or San Francisco that know more than you, or Washington, D.C., or Northern Virginia. The unvaccinated are beginning to look a little bit smarter with each passing week, in my opinion. And other people tend to agree as you just begin, one by one, these little stories get out. The vaccine side effects continue to accumulate that are beginning to show the risk of taking the vaccine over the long haul may be more prohibitive or dangerous than the pandemic itself, especially as the pandemic will naturally wane. Various oral and IV medications that are working early in the treatment of those that do become rather sick are showing to be more attractive than the vaccine risks themselves, especially because the vaccinated will need these endless boosters, which make the bottom line of Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, and anybody else in the field. It keeps the billions with a B dollars just rolling down the hill into their coffers. Endless boosters. And see, we know that some people have troubles and then they get the second shot. There are more troubles. And we're going to begin to watch the booster shots in the United States. Overseas, we're already beginning to see the issues. This is cumulative effect. And do you really want your child at age 5, 6, or 8, or 9 to get this for the next 5 or 6 years because these companies are so afraid of the corona bug, the man-made in a lab corona bug, where people that are in the United States like Dr. Fauci and others, that Dr. Ralph Barrick, who've been playing with this stuff for years and trying to cover their tracks like a cat covering their business, hoping these vaccines will work to make the pandemic go away so we'll forget and we'll think he was a hero. I don't know if I want to... The pressure on a virus, there's something about the way nature works. And these viruses, I read an article, and I want you to think about this very carefully. It was talking about how certain viruses mutate over time and what they do. And I've got a friend who lives out out west, and he is a medical doctor, has been one for close to 40 years. Well experienced. By the way, he endured COVID last year and came through. And he and I were talking on the phone earlier this year. And I was asking about variants. This is before the word Delta variant ever was breathed by the media. And this is before we had any significant amount of the population vaccinated with either the Moderna or the Pfizer or even the Johnson & Johnson. Now, this is just the very beginning. Talking like, March, April. And he and I are having this discussion about the virus. And he was talking about how in the normal progression of things, a virus tends to mutate to become more infectious. In other words, it spreads, but it tends to become less lethal, less bad symptoms, in a way, it killing its host does not do it any good. It does not continue after the host is dead. It's like I've got one mission: to enter a body and spread more virus to more bodies. Sounds rather evil, but it is what it is. But he said that over time, generally, we see that a lot of these viruses of this nature tend to, over time, mutate down a little bit and become more infectious. He said in his case, he kind of wished he had waited a little bit to get COVID-19 because the variant that he was seeing then was a lot easier than what he had gone through. But he also shared with me a thought. And he said what his concern was, and many doctors, and of course you're not allowed to say certain things because your medical boards will come after you for telling the truth in this world. He said, what I'm afraid of is some of these vaccines out there concern me. And I'm afraid that this natural process of how a virus mutates to evade could create some kind of a really bad mutation. He said that before the Delta variant. And a lot of people are thinking the Delta variant is not caused by the unvaccinated. It is actually created in the vaccinated and spread to everybody. We know one thing for certain. These vaccines have two things in common. They don't stop the spread, and they don't stop you from getting it. What used to be, I looked at a chart a while back, breakthrough cases. I got news for you. This is not a rare occurrence like they were trying to tell us in May and June or back in April. Oh, it's a 1 in a million breakthrough case, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100, 1 in 5, 1 in 1. I mean, it's come down. I'm looking at charts, especially from nations that have been heavily vaccinated. And there's a trend. And you can't miss this trend when you look at it. Virtually every case in Israel is a breakthrough case. Virtually every case in any place that has been heavily vaccinated is now a breakthrough case. It is not a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That sounded good a few months ago. All sounded good back in May when get the vaccine, take off your mask. You're done. You're bulletproof. And we find out it was all a lie. So let's address that idea, of the intelligence of the unvaccinated. Vaccine hesitancy is it's got a lot of aspects to it. And truly, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with your level of education or basic intelligence. There's a university, well-known, Carnegie Mellon University. They did a study tracking vaccine hesitancy across educational levels. And according to the study, who is the group with the highest vaccine hesitancy? Is it somebody with an 8th grade education with 3 kids living in a mobile home in a really rural setting? No. It's actually somebody with a PhD. And these can't all be just to people with liberal arts degrees or degrees in no particular topic. Many of them are scientists. Many of these are researchers. Many of them in the medical field. Many in data and risk assessment. The ones that can read data and figure out a risk assessment are the least likely to take the experimental vaccine. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me in the least. That makes total sense. To make this bogus claim that there's a pandemic of the unvaccinated is therefore not true. And that's why this nurse from California asked the question that I started the program with. Why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the protection that did not protect the protected in the first place? You'd think that would make common sense. You'd think that they would understand that on the old Three Stooges program, or Tom and Jerry, or Bugs Bunny could figure this out. If the vaccine does not prevent infection, then the vaccinated remains at some kind of risk. And the unvaccinated would be less likely to choose a vaccine that doesn't really work. Now, if they actually did work, then the vaccinated have nothing to fear from those that chose not to take the vaccine. So why is the government using the power of threats, taking away your income, your food, your house, your travel to take this experimental vaccine? What is possessing them when the information says it doesn't work? It doesn't work as promised. We know that the messenger RNA vaccines, its efficacy is actually rather narrow, and it is focused on what they believe is the original alpha strain of COVID-19. So it targets just one antigen group on a spike protein. In other words, it may work for the original, but it's doing diddly on the variants. We don't even know if it really is doing any good or how much it may or may not be helping. We also know, and I've seen this too, that a lot of the numbers you see that come out of some hospital groups are, shall we say, favored toward the vaccinated. I remember sharing the audio clip from a Zoom meeting. How can we make the numbers look more scary? Wait a minute, if somebody came in with a broken arm and they tested positive for COVID, they're not really a COVID patient, but we're going to count them as a COVID patient. And if their test should go negative while they're still in the hospital, can we still count them as a COVID patient? Yeah, really, that's what they were trying to do. They're trying to keep as many of the unvaccinated called COVID patients, all in an effort to gin up more fear and more people taking these shots that are increasingly proving not to work. Do you understand why I'm so concerned about this? Why this drives me crazy? Side effects, hey, we haven't had enough time to find out the long term. Can anybody tell me what these vaccines will do to the general population in 3 years, 2 years, or 5? Can you give me an honest answer based upon real-world data? The answer is you can't. If you could, then we could possibly have a really authorized, not a phony authorized. This FDA authorization of Comirnaty, in my opinion, is about as bogus as a $3 bill. I think it was a smoke and mirror game to bolster up the administration and try to get more people to be suckered into taking this stuff. So if it doesn't help with the new strain, and if instead it pushes pressure, as my doctor friend has explained to me, to mutate this thing, so what are we doing it for? And why are we talking about giving it to children? And why do people like Fauci think, maybe give it to them as they're born? Yeah, let's give a little baby boy a shot that we know has a really high risk of causing heart damage, and have this child spend his entire life with a damaged heart. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense if you're a reprobate. It makes a lot of sense if you have an evil heart. It makes a lot of sense if you are living in unnatural fear, and it makes a lot of sense if you're trying to cover up something evil and disgusting you have done in creating this worldwide pandemic virus. The vast, what they call phase 3 of the trials for these vaccines is not going well. By the way, if you didn't know, we are in the phase 3 trial. There's other phases, but we're in that. And that doesn't even end for another year or so. So how could they approve a vaccine that they haven't completed the trial? I don't know. But President Biden and Jan Paskey says it's the real deal. It's abundantly clear to me, and for anybody that is advocating for public health, if they truly care about public health, they would not push these unknown vaccines any farther. They would stop talking about jabbing children with this stuff. Story I shared yesterday out of Indiana. 2 little kids get it. They're already having health issues. Iceland has stopped giving Moderna to anybody, which is a step in the right direction. Sweden, Denmark, and Finland have banned the vaccine for anybody under the age of 30. Yeah, they've been doing more people being vaccinated than we are. They're beginning to, shall we say, see the cumulative effect, and it's not going well. The VIR system, which maybe on a good day catches between 1 and 10% of all the adverse effects, major illnesses, and even deaths. Yeah, what you just heard me say. Captures maybe 1%, with some maybe as high as 10%. Too many stories about too many doctors trying to fill out the form and the thing quits on them, makes them restart. If they get a phone call or get interrupted, it times out. Takes a half hour and you're not paid to do it. Doctors have too many things to do right now. So in a system that may get 1 to 10%, we know there's 16,000 people died, 23,000 major disabilities, myocarditis, urgent care visits, like 75,000 hospital stays. In other words, we know that there is a lot of adverse effects. And if we are looking at this system that is unreported, maybe that 16,000 is 160,000, and it's being attributed to things like heart attacks, strokes, childhood myocarditis for teenagers that are taking it now. No one wants to really talk about this. There's a lot of whistleblower data. There's a thing called Project Salus. We're going to get into that in just a moment. I've got that story. And then I've got a story about a complete reprobate teacher. And I'm about to give you another in one of many hundreds of reasons that our children should be removed from these public, disastrous, satanic indoctrination centers we call the public schools. If you believe in what we're doing, have you visited our website of late? Maybe you saw it months ago. It's changed. I've been working on it. There's still some work to do, but I'm working on it. And that address is truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. You can find out information about the program. Our mailing address is there. And also there's some that give online. It can be done from there. I'm working on trying to find a better online pay method. There's actually a Christian group out there that I'm beginning to try to get some information and see what it's going to take. I'd rather do it than what I've got, and we'll see if we can get that done maybe during this time we're here in the next week or 2 or 3. But if you like using a regular check made out to Ancient Word Radio, that is what my parent ministry is called, that I put together years ago. Make it out to Ancient Word Radio. It can be mailed to Truth to Ponder. And our mailing address right now while we are in Florida is 5753. That's 5753. And it's on Highway 85, Little Highway 85 North. And this is in a small town in Northwest Florida. 5753 Highway 85 North. There's a box number, 3248. That is 3248. 3248. And the city is Crestview. Crestview, one word, Crestview, Florida. Zip code 32536. Once again, 5753 Highway 85 North, number 3248, Crestview, Florida, 32536. When I get back, I'm going to finish up this. Why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected if the protection is not working? We're going to get back to that. It just shows, the intellectual it's like a bankruptcy out there. It's almost like a mental illness. It's almost like a reprobate mind. it's almost like delusion. We'll be right back.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
The price of faithfulness. Shalom Aleichem, this is the nice Jewish boy, Jonathan Kahn, your Jewish connection, bringing you the riches of your Jewish roots in Jesus. Now get your pen out as fast as you can so you don't miss out on receiving a special free gift you're going to get and love in a moment. Now, in the Iron Curtain countries, believers were put in prison for their faith, but what they'd often do is they'd go to the wife of a man who was in prison for his faith, and they would go and they'd try to force her to divorce him. And they would use every kind of pressure they could, poverty, the threat of arresting her, all sorts of things. And there was a woman whom I knew, Sabina Wormbrand, who was threatened because they tried to make her divorce her husband, Richard, who was in prison for his faith. Finally, she ended up saying, listen, I didn't marry my husband only for the happy times. We were united forever. In the Lord, whatever may come, I will not divorce him. Now, if she gave in, she would have ruined her testimony, her ministry, and her calling. Now, we live in a society where people leave each other with no pressure, no bullying, no threats, no hardship, no force, but because I don't love her anymore, or I don't love him anymore, I love somebody else. That's not love. That's a sin against love. And for believers to be involved in such things, it's an abomination to God. If you call yourself by the name of God, remember God is faithful to you even when you don't deserve it. True love is precious. True faithfulness has a price, but it's more than worth it. If you call yourself by his name, then you be faithful too, in sickness, in health, in good times and bad, when it's easy, when it costs you everything. And when you don't love that person anymore, love them anyway. When you have no more reason to love them anyway, because that's the way God loves you. Want more? Ask for The Way of the Great. Now, the free gift for you, the mystery hidden for 2,000 years in the sands of Israel, better than Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's real. The mystery of the temple doors, you'll love it, and Sapphires, your daily spiritual vitamin supply for victorious life in God. So how do you get this free, all free? Easy. Just remember Jesus' real Hebrew name, Yeshua, and you dial it. That's it. Just dial 1-800-YESHUA-1. You will be blessed, but call now. That's 1-800-YESHUA-1. I invite you to minister with me and bring the good news back to the people who gave it to you, Israel and the unreached peoples of every tribe and tongue on 5 continents. You'll have a great part. How? Just call 1-800-YESHUA-1. You can have a part in the end time harvest. That's YESHUA-1. Or write me direct. Here's how. Just write to the Nice Jewish Boy, Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. That's the Nice Jewish Boy, Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. Well, till next time, this is Jonathan Kahn saying, be faithful. Shalom Aleichem. Peace be to you, my friend, in Messiah Echatan, the bridegroom of your soul.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of our Tuesday edition of Truth to Ponder. And I'm your host, Bob Bierman. We are coming to you from Florida. We had spent a lot of time over the beginning of this program over a year ago, mostly broadcasting from our place up in Georgia. It just seemed the right place to be to do the program at the time. But right now, there are so many things that need to be done in terms of ministry, in terms of this program, in terms of some wonderful opportunities that God has presented. And we need to be here for an extended amount of time, and we're going to be here. And I'll be talking more in the days and weeks ahead about some of the things that we're doing. I really believe in using shortwave. And I mentioned on this program and yesterday, there's some that criticize, well, you're on some stations that have some strange people. Well, so be it. Any place the gospel is preached is going to have strange people. You don't go to a town or a community with everybody that's already like-minded to you. I need to be a voice crying in the wilderness and proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ. You want to know something? When the power of the Holy Spirit gets a hold of somebody, all of a sudden discernment can come if you want it to. There's some people that, I remember this great line, their minds are like concrete, thoroughly mixed up and too well set. We'll probably deal with that later this week. I want to get back to what I'm discussing. I started the program today. If you're just joining in, if you're listening, on shortwave and you don't get a chance to hear it as a podcast, there was a retired nurse from California that had the greatest statement I've ever read. And it says, why do the protected need to be protected from the unprotected by forcing the unprotected to use the very protection that did not protect the protected in the first place? It's kind of like saying, Bob, it's cold outside here in Ontario or one of the provinces of Canada where they've gone just absolutely berserk. That poor pastor who was raised under communist Poland probably wishes, communist Poland is starting to look pretty good right now compared to the province he lives in with a reprobate, fearful-minded, idiot judge. He can't say anything bad about the face mask, the unproven face diaper. He's got to always promote the line given by the reprobate, delusional state, cursed of God. I really believe they are. What's happening in Australia? These police being used by thugs, just to crush anybody that disagrees with the government. You could go to jail for life for what you post on social media. If you're going against the government narrative, technically that can happen to you. Informally, free Australia. Australia's gone crazy. Satan is rejoicing and dancing in the streets with what he has done to destroy that nation. It's the beginning of Satan's plan. I try to look rationally at the things that are going on, and I try to help you because, and we're going to get into some real scripture later this week as well, but I want to just share this story just to kind of give you an update. We know that this vaccine is narrow. It's focused on the original strain, not the new ones. We now are hearing this, it kind of fades after 2 or 3 or 4 months, and by 6 months we're going to need boosters, maybe at 5, maybe 2 or 3 boosters a year. And what kind of health effect is that going to have? It's going to be healthy for the bottom line of Moderna. It's going to be really good for the bank account from Pfizer that once had to pay out billions in fines for fraud. Hey, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? We talk about these vaccines, that they're actually, as my doctor friend called it, they're leaky. That means they are driving the virus the way God created nature. They're driving the virus to escape by creating a variant. Now, if you didn't catch that, let me say this again. This is not some medical quackery. This has been around and understood for many, many, many decades. This is easy to find stuff. They don't want you to find it because when you know the truth, you're set free from the stupidity. You're set free from the satanic message. You're set free from the idea of a digital ID, digital currency, all one world, all reset. You see what's coming. So you find out that you have doctor after doctor, author after author, over time has talked about what we have seen in the past, a leaky vaccine, which comes out during a pandemic, the worst time to be doing this, and it creates a way for a virus to escape by becoming a mutant or a variant. And if the booster is just another iteration of the same vaccine, it'll give us some more variants that will never help against the new strain that just came out or the original strain. It won't be able to do, it'll always be behind and never catch up. Ever notice we've never had a successful flu vaccine? If you really do the numbers, some people think that they're bulletproof with a flu vaccine. Well, it may have been true at one time. But the more you take it, you get down from oh, maybe it's a 50% effective. For most people that take it on a regular basis, it's barely 20% effective for the flu you may have, and that's assuming they guessed it correctly. There's no certainty. There's none with this. And so we now know that this is the phase 3 trials that are going on that we've talked about, that we have all this data. And you have governments that want vaccine passports. You have governments that want to say you can't work if you're in a company of over 100, though there's no constitutional legitimacy for anything of that nature to be declared by Joe Biden. He does not have that authority, period, end of discussion. And it needs to go to the courts to solve this issue. We noticed that it was last week, first part of the week, actually not this past weekend, the weekend before, some of the pilots at Southwest Airlines, there was all kinds of weather issues that only affected Southwest Airlines, and they had to cancel thousands of flights. And they got the word that their pilots don't want this forced vaccine. Thank heavens, Southwest Airlines blinked, and that mandate disappeared. It needs to be blinked everywhere. There's no need for this leaky vaccine to keep causing more issues. Unless you want a digital currency, one world government peering into your bank account, controlling your kids, if that's what you want, then go for it. You know, in the Medicare system, there have been a lot of deaths that are just what you call excessive in the Medicare system. They come shortly after the vaccine, about 50,000 that they know of. There's a program, a computer program called Project Salus that follows the Medicare population, which I'm in, and shows that vaccinated Medicare recipients are having worse outcomes week by week of the type consistent with an antibody-dependent enhancement, which is pretty much a dangerous thing you don't want. This is not a good enhancement. This occurs when a vaccine antibody actually accelerates the infection, leading to worsening COVID-19 infection outcomes. This ADE, antibody-dependent enhancement, has occurred previously with trials. Ready for this? Hang on to your seats, folks. Let me just stop right here. You do realize that for the past 20 years, people like Dr. Anthony Fauci and company have been trying to perfect a vaccine against a coronavirus. You do know that. And it's failed over and over miserably. They've been trying this, so that's why they're jumping into the mRNA, hoping for a slightly different outcome. Because here's what was happening. Week by week, over time, Medicare recipients are beginning to have worsening outcomes week by week because the vaccine antibodies actually accelerate the infection, leading to worsening outcomes. The CDC and FDA don't want you really to know this. Facebook, it's like, oh, the vaccines are tested and they're safe and effective. Go to our Vaccine Information COVID-19 Center today, and we'll tell you what to think and we will tell you what to do because we are Facebook. We know more than you, even about elections. So here's the problem. They knew this with other type of coronavirus vaccines, not COVID-19 per se, but I'm saying any coronavirus vaccine has failed in the animal trials because what happens? In animal trials, these problems begin to accelerate over time. And you realize that when you took your Pfizer, NTech, emergency use authorization vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, though that data was never given to you. You don't even have a true informed consent. And you signed a little waiver saying, I can't sue the government. I can't sue the company that made it. Can't sue anybody. I'm on my own. There's a thing called the Rome Declaration. 6,700 some odd medical signatories attesting that the handling of the pandemic amounts to crimes. Because we do know things that work to save, to cure with good outcomes, but we're playing around with an experiment on a global scale. This sounds like the stuff that you would expect from Dr. Mengele in Germany in the 40s. And the narrative of fear is beginning to fall apart in some parts of the world. That's the good news. You know, the truth will set you free. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this topic today. There's so many things I wanted to talk about, and I doubt if I'll get to it. But I want you to hear this. This is going to be important for you. The narrative that the CNNs, the MSNBCs, New York Times, Washington Compost, all of them, it's beginning to crack, starting to fall apart. If you look at data, and I mean, I'm spending some serious money to get information to give to you. This is not, some of this stuff I have to pay for, but I'm glad that I am because it gives me honest information. I hate going to websites where you know that half the stuff you're getting is nonsense and doesn't come true. I just want the facts. I feel like Joe Friday from the old TV program Dragnet. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. Right now in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, they've ended their COVID-19 restrictions, and they're now doing better than the United States, United Kingdom, Israel. Yeah, 3 countries that continue to vaccinate in panic during this pandemic. And now Mexico, Guatemala, Indonesia, pretty much all of Africa, and parts of India now have low vaccination rates and are doing vastly better than the United States because they're managing the pandemic, not trying to use a experimental vaccine to eliminate it. They're allowing immunity to build up. They're allowing therapies to be used to treat those that are sick. There's a whole province in India. Boy, the WHO is furious. It's like you've stirred a bee's nest with them. This one province, the name escapes me, but I know there's 240 million people in that province. That's a lot more than Canada. That's almost the size of the United States. And they've successfully, virtually eradicated themselves of the coronavirus. And they didn't use a vaccine to do it. They used that evil horse dewormer, as CNN called it, ivermectin. You know, back in August, I can remember Dr., father of the virus Fauci, the wizard of COVID. The Wizard of COVID was on television talking about the Sturgis motorcycle rally. Now, that's something I wouldn't go to, but last year, 250,000 attended. This year, 500,000 people attended the Sturgis motorcycle rally back in August. And everybody was talking about super spreader COVID event. Thousands are going to get sick and die. They're going to bring it back. The Fauci has spoken. Do as I say. Put on your face mask. Get the vaccine. Stay home. It didn't happen. There was no super spread. Can't find it. Didn't happen in South Dakota. Football season started in August. Stadiums, the Southeast in particular, places like Clemson, University of Georgia. I can think of many, 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 where you have 80,000 fans. 80,000 fans yelling and screaming. And by the way, none of which are wearing a mask because they're not in New York. They're not having to deal with the stupidity of the prior and current New York governor who believes that, you're my apostles to spread the message of the vaccine because God gave us the vaccine to make us well. So do what God wants. Do what God wants and get the vaccine. You'd have to be a complete moron to listen to that woman talking in that church that God gave us the vaccine and you're her apostles and smart people take the vaccine. Yeah, smart people are always part of a second and third phase of a testing on something that could kill you. Why is there this complete disconnect in the minds of so many, especially in the blue states and a few rhinos? If the vaccine is so important, why do our government leaders and illegal aliens not have to take it? 13 states that are Democrat with a high vaccination rate have the highest case rates, while many of the Republican states with no demand for taking it are now doing better. How did that happen? Needs to be clear that the government has manipulated some of this COVID data to perpetuate fear. Like I say, when I heard and saw that Zoom call that somebody leaked, the hospital was trying to give you fake and phony numbers. This is a totalitarian concept. Now, I want to share one last story here real quick. This is important, and I may pick it up tomorrow. This story comes out of Pennsylvania, and this educator, or, dumbifier, indoctrinator from Pennsylvania, not an educator, this indoctrinator from Pennsylvania is enough to convince any parent in that district or probably that state to consider homeschooling or any other Christian alternative. According to the police, a teacher who works around small children every day in an elementary school was arrested after he became enraged when a makeshift plastic barrier, like a little kid's fort, that he put up to prevent COVID was removed. WPMT TV reported in the city of York, Pennsylvania, that Chad Garrick, age 50, showed up to Sinking Springs, what a name for a school, Sinking Springs Elementary School to teach. Sinking Education, Sinking Intelligence Elementary School. That should be the name. Upon arrival, the sixth grade teacher discovered that his homemade little barrier was gone. And he got drastic. He threatened to kill those who would not let him have his safety net. I need to live in my bubble world. A person that worked in the school cafeteria heard some very specific threats. There was some language that I obviously cannot and will not repeat here, but he wanted to shoot all the at the Central York Educational Service Center. That's what he said. He said, if I get sick, I'll come to school and make sure I give COVID to everybody I can. He was arrested by the police. No weapons found in his car, but plenty at home. Now, he gets out on a $25,000 unsecured bail. In other words, they don't even have the money. He's $25,000 honor system bail. He appears October 22nd. Good for him. Now, notice that if you sit in Nancy Pelosi's chair, you're going to rot in jail for months with no bail. If you say something negative in some countries, you can go to jail for life. But this teacher, because he had his little phony, baloney, make me feel good plastic barrier that's going to save him from the COVID in his classroom. If you're so afraid, if you're vaccinated, Mr. Teacher, then you should be bulletproof from it. Doesn't the vaccine make you COVID proof? This is what a teacher is? They don't have a common sense God gave seafood. Another example of how unreasonable our legal system has become. It's not a justice system. It's all tainted and destroyed. How does one go from presuming to halt the spread of COVID to wishing to kill those who deny them their preferred safe space? For that matter, why would any rational person wish to infect everyone around them, kids and all, because I got COVID and you took down my plastic fort? Maybe he should stay at home and just build a plastic fort in his living room and live there. You know, if anybody had seen that before, maybe that should have been a red flag to somebody in the administration of schools, but they're run by reprobates now. So you're not going to get anywhere. Another example. Teachers are given too much credit in a country where every police officer owns the actions of a couple of bad people. If a police officer should justifiably shoot, I've read this before, that a criminal, all cops are deemed to be horrible. But if an elementary school teacher starts to scream and have a hissy fit threatening to kill people because you took down my plastic fort, my Corona fort, well, that's okay. I needed to do this program today, and I hope that, I know I spent a lot of time on this one topic, but this is the stuff that needs to be said over and over again. Don't allow yourself to become deceived by the nonsense that is spread in our world today. We have a lot of things to discuss later this week, trust me. And I hope and pray I can get to all of the topics that I wanted to get to already by this time this week. But I just felt the story that I shared with you and all this information about how the vaccines are failing. The numbers are not what they say. It's becoming increasingly obvious, except to, what was that line? There is none so blind that he or she that will not see. Remember that from that song, Everything is Beautiful? I can remember that. There are a lot of people, they don't want to see the truth because they have a narrative. And see, the narrative is stronger to them than the truth. Those that want globalism, those that want further control on your life, they have to keep this pandemic going. They have to get people fearful to get the vaccination. Because if you're not afraid, you can't be controlled. Name me one despot individual in history that used kindness to win people over. No, they use fear. And it's a sad state when the United States government, it's a sad state of affairs when in Canada, Australia, and other places around the world use police brutality and tactics to instill fear, to put you into bondage, and force you to do something that is probably not in your best interest. But then again, as long as you have a reprobate mind, this will all seem totally and 100% normal, because you're living in satanic self-acquired delusion, and you did it willingly. There's going to be a day of judgment coming for many, and the truth is going to get out. We're going to change gears maybe Thursday or Friday. I've got to deal with an issue that some people have raised, and I think that you'll learn a lot. If you believe in our ministry, would you consider supporting us financially for the airtime? Yes, I know it's shortwave, and I know there's some people on shortwave that maybe you don't want to hear. Maybe they shouldn't be there. But then again, let's be a voice in the wilderness, giving the truth. Our mailing address is 5753 Highway 85 North, number 3248. 5753 Highway 85 North, number 3248, Crestview, Florida. Crestview, Florida 32536. And if you make out a check, just make it payable to Ancient Word Radio. Until tomorrow, may God bless.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.